This is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful engineering leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode is brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications from design to delivery with React, Node.js, and Angular. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Welcome everyone to the Level Up Engineering Podcast. My name is Karolina Tóth and I will be your host. Today I have a very exciting guest with me, Mike Seavers. He was CTO of Riot Games, which you would be familiar with if you ever played League of Legends, for example. So today I have Mike with me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And let's start by introducing you a little bit. What should we know about you? What are your passions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have three passions in life: technology, leadership, and video games. I started out when I was 10 years old. I learned how to program on my Atari. It was an Atari 800 that my parents bought for me. So I used to spend, my nights and weekends, learning how to program BASIC on it. And that just, started out a life of loving engineering and loving software development, loving video games. And later on, when I entered the workforce, I very quickly started leading software teams, either as a project manager or as a software engineering manager. And then, eventually found my way to Riot when Riot was a smaller company than it is today. And I helped Riot grow to what is, now probably about 3,000 people. And through that, Carolina, I think you and I talked about this before. I made a lot of mistakes when I was a young manager, and as a human, I still make mistakes today. But one of the reasons I'm passionate about management and leadership is because I hope to help other people avoid a lot of those mistakes I made when I was first starting out. So, but yeah, that sums it up in a nutshell: video games, software, and leadership for me.
Thank you so much. I hope that we can also help some people avoid some mistakes, or even just not even think about the mistakes because they learn the right way for the first time. Yeah. All right, let's jump right into today's topic. We are going to talk about high-performing, self-managing teams. And let's start by clearing out the definition so that we can all be on the same page. What is your definition of a high-performing team?
Yeah, that's there's a lot of ways to think about high performance, and I think the lens I think about it through is through the leader. You can measure a team's performance, by the results they produce, things like that. But one of the things that I've really seen make a huge difference in a team is whether the team can work is dependent on the leader or not dependent on the leader. And because, if the leader is, making all the decisions or calling all the shots or, all of those kinds of things, the team is probably limiting their potential, if that makes sense. What happens when the leader leaves? If the leader leaves, moves on to another organization or another team, you can oftentimes judge the effectiveness of that leader as to whether the team's performance, continues to improve, stays the same, or declines. And if a leader leaves a team and performance declines, that's a pretty good sign that leader didn't actually create the conditions for the team to manage themselves and understand for themselves what high performance meant, because they're the ones kind of making all the decisions and doing all the hard thinking.
Okay, in that sense, what's the point of a leader? I am sure that a lot of people will think, okay, then if the team can function without me, why am I there?
Yeah. I draw a lot of parallels to, if you think about what are the high performing teams that you see kind of just out in the world, not even in the workplace, right? I think a lot of like, sports teams or teams that perform really well in the Olympics. And if you watch how those teams work, like what do they do? What are the conditions? What are the behaviors you see that determine whether the team is successful or not? And if you look at a high performing, let's say a sports team, a football team, or an American football team, or a baseball team, or soccer, or an Olympic team, the coach isn't on the field while they're playing the game, making all the decisions for everybody. The coach is, before the game and after the game, saying, "Hey, I noticed when you did this, we could have done better if you had done it this way," or before you go get out on the field, just remember these things. It's very much a coaching relationship. It's helping tease the best performance out of people. And what you often see, I mean, I did this when I was younger. What you often see in young managers is that desire to get on the field and do it for them. Where they get impatient, or they're like, well, I don't like what I see there, and so I'm gonna go play this position for that player, rather than watch them kind of stumble and fumble and coach them and help them get better. And so so to answer your question directly, what's the point of a manager or a leader? The point of a leader is to get the best performance out of everyone else, and to make the goals clear and the vision clear, not to go do the work and make all the decisions for everybody.
Right. Thank you for that clarification as well. So there is a place for leaders, even if the team is self-managing. So what does the team look like? How can we know if a team is a self-managing and high-performing team?
Yeah. When I've taken over a lot of teams over the years, and one of the first things I look for is how decisions are made. And the surest sign that a team has, an opportunity to maybe be better, or there's an opportunity for the leader to do better, is the leader having to approve everything, approve every action, and make every decision, right? Or on a really high performing team, can the most junior person on the team, like think of the most junior person on the team, do they have the ability, and are they empowered to make a meaningful decision that would affect the team's overall performance? That to me is what a self-managed team looks like. Is they're not dependent on the manager or the leader to make all the decisions, right? And again, if I go back to the sports analogy, no winning team requires the coach to say, how should I kick this ball, or where should I, the coaching happens before and after, and the team autonomously plays the game.
Okay, so when you gave this example, when you talk about kicking, it sounds like a very, very granular kind of thing that they have to do in order to play the game. And if I work with that metaphor in the workplace, I think about how, like minor things that people should make their decisions on. But then is it always that the team members should be feeling empowered, or where is the line? Like, I would imagine vision and strategy are set by the leader, but yep. How can we differentiate, or is there such a place to differentiate?
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Like, leadership's job is to be clear on what the goals and the vision are, right? When I'm working with a team, in fact, I ask this question of everybody, even to this day, when I'm having my one-on-ones with people. My question is are our goals clear, and is our vision clear? Do you understand what we're trying to accomplish, and what the near-term objective is? If they don't understand that, then you can't have an autonomous team, right? Like, the first requirement is everybody has to understand what winning looks like. But once everybody understands what winning looks like, here's the thing you'll see especially on software teams a lot, is an engineer will come to you and say, hey, Mike, should I design it this way or that way? And my response is usually, well, what's the goal that we're trying to accomplish? and which one do you think is better? Like, tell me which approach do you think is better and why, in light of our vision and our goals. A lot of managers will actually make that decision for the person because it's faster. When the engineer comes to them and says, hey, should I design it this way or that way? They'll take the easy, fast way and they'll say, well, I would choose that. And then that engineer goes and they'll just kind of do whatever the boss said, right? Without actually having taken the time to think through, wait a minute, our vision, our goals, there's these trade-offs in between these two designs. I would choose this one. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll tell an engineer, go think about it. Go think about our goals, go think about our vision. If you need me to clarify those things, I will. And then think about these two options that you have. Come back tomorrow and tell me which one you'd pick and why. And they usually come back and they'll have thought through it pretty well and say, I would choose this or that. And then my job, again, as the coach, is not to say, well, you're wrong or you're right. It's to point out, maybe flaws in their thinking. Maybe they made some assumptions that were inaccurate. Maybe they used some data that was flawed, or maybe they didn't use any data at all to inform their decision. What you're doing is you're teaching that person how to think. So the next time when they have a decision to make, they're not going to immediately bring it to me and say, Mike, please make this decision for me. They're gonna think, oh, goals, vision, decision, research, data, and then they come to you and they say, Mike, I'm thinking about making this decision. I've done the analysis, I've taken these two trade-offs, and this is the design I would choose. What do you think? And that's when you're winning, because now I can coach this person on how they thought through and solved the problem, not solving the problem for them.
That sounds like it's a wonderful world. And I really like it. But then I immediately started thinking about, like having time pressure. I am very cognizant of this because our company works, it's an agency, so we work for other companies, right? And sometimes it appears as if it were so much more, like smooth sailing if you could just make the decision and let the person go and work and have everything done by the deadline. So do you think this works in product companies only, or it works for agencies as well?
I think it works. I know we're talking about software engineering, but I think this works in any company for any type of leadership, for any type of, whether you're talking finance or engineering or product or or QA or any type of job. Again, a leader's job is to make the vision clear. Like, does it work 100% of the time? Like, I think your point is, like, sometimes there's deadlines and we need to just get the work done. And I think, look, I'm not going to sit here and say there weren't times where I just made the decision because it was faster. But when you do that, you got to kind of like acknowledge that you're robbing the team of a learning opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe afterwards you sit the team down and you say, hey, I made this decision and here's why. Does everybody understand that? And ideally, I wouldn't have to make this decision. You would make the decision for me. Because my argument would be, if everybody's doing that, if everybody on the team is thinking autonomously, you're actually going to move way faster. If everybody has to come to you to get your input before the decision's made, then you're actually probably moving a lot slower.
Okay, I think I see your point there. And it draws a lot on what I learn about, like agile development. I know it's sometimes considered a curse word these days, but self-assigning tasks and such sounds like when people take responsibility, then it's a lot faster than just assigning everybody what they should be doing. So let's talk a little more about what sets high-performing self-managed teams apart from, let's say, regular teams or more traditionally, historically accurate teams. How do you measure performance in your company or in previous companies? And how is performance different in each scenario?
Yeah. So again, assuming we're talking about leadership here, right? We're talking about managers and managers impact on teams. I measure a manager's performance by whether they can build a team that can deliver the results, if that makes sense, not by doing it themselves. So I care a lot that managers can get results through other people, because I really think that is again the job of a coach. That's the job of a leader. That's the job of a manager, is to tease the best performance out of everybody. And I coach managers and leaders all the time against doing the work themselves. So I'll tell you a story. I had a leader one time. He did really well getting the team to about 6 to 8 people. They had a very clear mission. They had a very clear vision. And the team did pretty well. They delivered on all their results. They had good production, performance metrics and all of that kind of stuff. So, by all the measures and all the results, the team was performing fine. But then we needed to grow that team. So we needed the team to expand its size. And it wasn't long before we really started seeing the cracks. The team started showing signs of underperformance. We were missing deadlines. We started having outages. There were all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that I remember from the time when this manager was building the team, one of the consistent pieces of feedback we were giving them was they were hiring pretty junior people. And that doesn't mean that you can't hire junior people, but I think they were hiring almost exclusively junior people that weren't able to be autonomous. And so we gave a lot of feedback about, are you hiring to delegate tasks to people, or are you hiring to have a team that is high performing and functioning, that doesn't require as much hand holding? Well, what ended up happening was we had this major company-wide initiative that this particular manager was the right person to lead. And so they had to kind of go get involved in this project and leave their team a little bit, not leave them, alone, but had to depend on the team to hit their deadlines and deliver the results. And things went from bad to worse pretty quickly. It became very clear that with this person, working on another thing, the team didn't have any direction. They didn't know what they were supposed to work on. People got frustrated. We started having turnover. And it was because, and when you went and talked to the team, which we did, I went and talked to everybody on the team, their response was, well, we need this person to make all the decisions, and they're not around because they're working on this other project. And so, and that's unfortunate for those people, right? Because, it wasn't, they didn't create that situation. The manager created that situation, right? The manager didn't set the team up for success. The manager didn't, pay attention to, I'm going to have a few junior people, so I need to have some senior people on the team that can provide, guidance and direction. I need to make sure that the vision and the goals are clear, so that if I can't be there at every moment to clarify that for everybody, the team still knows what to do. And so, anyway, long story short, it took 18 months to get that team back on track, and that involved replacing a lot of the leadership team. We had to make a lot of personnel changes. We had to transfer people to other parts of the organization, bring in some senior talent, clarify the vision, reset the goals, and then get that team kind of back on track. But back to the question, how do I measure performance? That manager didn't create a team that could produce the result. He was doing all of the work himself, and when he couldn't do the work, the team started failing, and that reflected on his performance.
So thank you for that story. Given that you don't have another project to put the leader on, do you send them on a week-long vacation to see if their team is doing all right without them?
No, you don't have to. That's a good question. No, you don't have to. As the manager of that manager, there's a lot you can do. When you're doing skip levels, which, hopefully if you manage other managers, you're doing skip levels. And you can ask people these same questions that I typically ask. Are the goals clear? Is the vision clear? How are decisions made on the team? Do you feel like you get to make important decisions that, or do you have to, do you have to go to your boss for approval for certain things? A lot of times, a key way to suss this out is when there is a failure, and every team makes mistakes and every team has failures. And if you dig into like what happened and why, you'll often see these signals of lack of clarity of vision and goals and lack of empowerment on the team because the manager is trying to do all the things. Yeah. Another warning sign, for what it's worth, is show me a manager that's running around with their hair on fire because they're doing like 1,000 different things, and I would bet you a symptom. One thing that person could probably do is be able to delegate more to their team and let them own it autonomously.
All right. So let's say that we have such a team that is able to self-manage, and you as the manager of the manager who manages that team. Wow, a lot of managers. So let's say that this is happening and this is great. But let's say we aren't working with such a team right now. Like, to anyone who is out there trying to create such an atmosphere where people can decide for themselves, apart from not telling them what they should do, what are some of the strategies that you can use to kind of show the way to the team or to the manager?
Yeah. One of the things that I do a lot of, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is first you have to pay attention to how many times is the team coming to you to ask questions for you to make the decision. And if you just if most people paid attention to this, like just in your notebook, just write down how, make a little tick mark every time somebody comes to you and says, hey boss, can I do this? Should I do that? Am I allowed to do that? Do you approve this? Pay attention to those words. Those aren't words of empowerment. Those are words of authority. Can I, should I, am I allowed to, can I have your approval? Like those are words of authority. And sometimes, look, you have to have some of that. We have to approve people's vacations and things like that. But when it comes to things that they should be able to decide for themselves, you have to pay attention to, are you out of usually it's because we want to move fast. Are you doing the thinking for that person? So that's the first step. Just identify how often that's happening. I think you'll typically find it happens not with everybody, but with certain people. And then what you need to do is just stop making decisions for them. So when they come to you and say, can I, a very simple question to ask in return is, what would you do if you were me? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? And make them think about the problem. After you do that a few times, either they will realize that they can't just go, get a decision from you, or you can even have a conversation with that person and say, look, I'm trying to help you not be blocked by me. I'm trying to help you not be dependent on me. I want you to think for yourself. I want you to take risks and make decisions, because that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to learn how to be a better engineer. That's how you're going to learn how to be a better employee of any kind, is by taking a chance and learning, and be willing to make mistakes. So pay attention to how many times people are asking you for permission, and then stop giving permission, unless it's something you absolutely have to.
Right. When you okay, so basically, I'm thinking, did you pick this up at one of the companies where you worked, or did you come to these conclusions by some set of experiences, or did you learn this from a set of leadership books, or what was your process of coming to this idea of creating self-managing teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, hindsight's 2020. It was a lot of things, all combined together. Some of the key things that I would point to are This was actually kind of a part of Riot's culture, to be honest, was, just this expectation that we hire really smart people and then we expect them to just go, solve problems. So that was kind of ingrained in our culture. When Riot was growing really fast, I think when I started at Riot, I think engineering was probably about 300 people. And when I left, it was over 1,000. So to give you a sense of how much it changed over 7 years, there was a period where, when engineering is about 300 people, you didn't have a lot of managers of managers of managers, if that makes sense. But like when we started getting larger, one of the things that we saw happening was when people went from being a frontline manager to suddenly having to lead other managers, the failure rate there was very high. Like we saw a lot of leaders just not able to make that transition. That's typically like the director transition at a lot of companies, is when you're suddenly managing other managers. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about why was that happening? What was going on? What was happening there? And so we did a lot of investigation. We did a lot of kind of, talking to managers, talking to teams, and this theme of managers not being able to, step out of the day-to-day direction of the team. Like, go do this, go do that. We have to do this. Please do that. When you're suddenly leading other leaders, those leaders want to have autonomy. They want to lead their team, right? And if you try to like tell them how to go do that, like that just doesn't work. You've got to teach them. And so we really started, kind of grappling with this idea of managers as coaches and managers as teachers, and creating the atmosphere and the culture for success, as opposed to dictating what success has to look like for every person in the organization. Around that time, I also happened to be reading a book. It's called "Turn the Ship Around." It's the story of a captain who in the United States Navy, who took over the worst performing submarine in the Navy and turned it into the best performing submarine in the Navy. And this theme of, leaders, everything being dependent on the commander was one of the things that was causing poor performance. And so there was a phrase in that book. He talks about, he taught people to, instead of asking for permission, to say, "I intend to." And so on my leadership team, we all just kind of read, I told everybody about this book. We all read it. And I'd say for 6 months, in fact, if you went and talked to any of the leaders that were on the team at that time, if you walked up to them and said, "I intend to," they would probably, kind of smile at you, because we made this part of our vocabulary. Was, people would come to me and say, "Hey, Mike, can I do this?" And I'd just kind of shake my head. I'm like, "What do you, okay, I intend to do this, not can I do that." And I'm like, "Okay, why, have you done your research? What were the other options?" All that kind of stuff. And so, so that was a big factor too, all around that same time. Yeah, those were the key things. And I've just found it to be true. Like, the more I kind of, adopted this idea, and the more I've made it a part of how I lead my leaders and coach other people, the more I've just found it to be true.
Yeah, that works for me. This is a really fun story. I kind of hear that you have to be kind of get people behind this idea, and then make it like a fun, common understanding. Like everybody knows that we're doing this on purpose, and it's fun.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's an article, an HBR article. I think it was written a long time ago, probably in the 80s. It's the title of it is something about who's got the monkey. And the point of the article is people, your direct reports will come to you and want to give you their monkeys. And that's, that's basically this thing that they're responsible for. Managers will take those responsibilities from people all the time by making decisions for them, by telling them they'll do, and so similar to what you're describing, everybody on my leadership team read that article. And so for months we were running around talking about monkeys. "I'm not taking your monkey. No, I'm not taking your monkey. No, you can't take my monkey." So Yeah.
So in this sense, the monkey is like the extra weight, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's the decision, right? It's the responsibility. So if you came to me and said, Mike, you know, I don't know how to make this decision, and I say, oh well, let me help you with that. I'll do that for you, right? Or you just took more work on yourself. You
Right.
just took their money. That's their job. And the other thing that's kind of a problem with that is now you're responsible. So if something goes wrong, you've taken that responsibility on yourself, right? And so now you missed an opportunity to potentially coach that person. And so you've got to be careful not to take other people's monkeys. Otherwise, again, show me a manager that is, overwhelmed, has way too much going on, all that kind of stuff. And this whole theme of they have a lot of monkeys on their back, or they're, they make their team come to them for approval, or, decisions about everything. Those are not always, but, sometimes things you'll see with people that are overwhelmed.
As you are telling me this, it all seems really great. And especially if the team also knows, like I'm trying to make an environment where you are empowered and you can finish your work in such a manner that you don't have to come to me for approval. Somehow I have this inkling that it's hard for the manager to sometimes say, no, I'm not going to make that decision for you, or I'm not going to help you kind of with that. Is that right? Like, is that some sort of a challenge within this framework?
It is. I mean, even myself, I think, especially if you're the kind of person who likes to help other people. And I found, a lot of great managers are people who want to help other people. That's why they get into management in the first place. I don't want to mislead anyone. I still struggle with this to this day. When people come to me and they ask for help, it takes a lot of, kind of mental, presence to think, is this a situation where I'm okay just making the decision, or do I really need this other person to own the decision? So it is hard. It's, it takes a lot of practice. But if you think about how you learn to lead and how you learn to manage, throughout my career, it was when somebody gave me a shot. It was when somebody said, hey, Mike, I need this outcome, and I'm going to trust you to go figure it out. And I was given, kind of the space and the support to go do that. Those were the times I learned more in my career than any other time in my career. When people told me where to go and how to do it, and, do this and do that, and hey boss, can I do that? Can I do this? I didn't grow during those times. Right. And so I think about that a lot with my direct reports. Am I creating the conditions where they're going to grow? Or am I shortcutting everybody's opportunity to learn and grow by just taking the easy, fast way out, right? And that's the difference, I think, between like a good manager and a great manager. A good manager can get results. A great manager can get results and grow their team and grow their people and help them all do that for somebody else someday also. That's the key.
All right, that works for me. If you could shed some light on how to create, like if you are the manager of a team, no matter what kind of a team, or maybe it matters, you tell me, how do you tell your direct reports, who are perhaps more used to managers or leaders who are going to make decisions for them, that you are not going to do it?
Yeah. It's you kind of alluded to this earlier. I think you're exactly right. If you make it part of, if you make it something everybody is doing, or you make it kind of fun, or you make it a thing, then that makes it a lot easier, right? So around that time, you know, where we were talking about this on my leadership team at Riot, we used to do a thing every time we sat down to do our quarterly goals. We'd set quarterly goals, and we'd look at last quarter's results and plan our next quarter. We would also have a theme for the quarter, and it was always a leadership theme, right? And so everybody on the team would know the theme for this month is we're not going to make decisions for each other, you know, and then and that's where this whole intend to thing came from, and everybody read the, you know, turn the ship around and all of that. And so for that quarter, for that entire quarter, it was top of mind. Everybody was talking about it. It was just a part of what everybody was thinking about every day. And so it made it real easy when, you know, one of my directs would come to me and say, "Hey, Mike, you know, can I do this thing?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to answer that question. Remember, the theme for the quarter is you gotta at least think about this for yourself once before I give you an opinion." And that just made it easy, right? But you know, not every team has that kind of, you know, camaraderie or whatever. I also don't think it's unfair to, with your direct reports, just be very direct. My expectation of you as a manager, as a leader, is that you can think for yourself and make decisions for yourself. And so I'm going to help you do that. I'm going to give you the support. But when you come to me and ask for me to make a decision for you that I think you can make on your own, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to ask you to think about it. I'm going to ask you to at least, you know, make a proposal. We can talk about it. I'll help you think through it. I'll help you, you know, if you get stuck and you want to talk through it, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not going to actually be the one to make the decision. And if you just, you know, are honest with people, I think most people, my experience has been most people are very, very open to and grateful for that kind of opportunity, again, because they can see that helps them grow. And it is very different, but yeah, just being upfront with people. So
yeah, good. Yeah, it sounds good. I hope that we will see more of this in our lives. I was thinking to ask you, my understanding is that you left Riot because you kind of achieved what you could there, and you were looking for, again, a smaller team where you can maybe get more hands-on with the startup or kind of small company moving around. Was App on Board having a similar kind of mindset about leadership from the start, or how did you kind of get this started?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, I left Riot because, you know, Riot was getting to a size and, you know, kind of stability that, you know, I enjoy growing things, enjoy scaling things. And so, yeah, going back to a startup was just something I was looking for. You know, the App on Board team, I think, was very much one of the teams that I've worked with that was very used to people making decisions and the CEO making all the decisions. And I think anybody on the team would tell you, you know, I spent the first few months making sure everybody in the company understood our vision and our goals, and just clarifying that for everybody. And so that you can even have the conditions where people could make, you know, their own decisions. It's still a work in progress. You know, we've all read the Who's Got the Monkey articles. You know, I talk to the team regularly. I coach a lot of the leaders on, you know, I don't want to make this decision for you. I want you to make the decision. You know, but it takes a while. You know, it takes a while to build that into a culture, right? Because, you know, I don't want anybody listening or watching here to think that, you know, this just happens overnight. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of, you know, nobody becomes an Olympic winning team overnight. You know, it takes practice. And the other thing that I think is really important is sometimes you just don't have the right people on the team. Some people aren't capable of working that way. Some people don't have the skills. Some people don't have the mindset. Some people don't want to be empowered to make decisions. They would rather let other people think for them. And I think it's up to each company and organization to decide whether that's okay. But I would argue you're probably going to miss out on some performance that you could have if that's kind of the culture you want to have. So yeah, work in progress at App on Board. But I think every leader that I work with there would tell you that this is something that's pretty important to me and something that we're trying to work on. So
sounds good. Thank you. With that said, we kind of touched on this, but I want to maybe get a little deeper. How do you establish this kind of mindset on the different levels of leadership with the small company? It's kind of like there is a team, and then there is a manager of the team, and then perhaps there is a CEO, and that's kind of it. But with bigger established companies, there are more layers of leadership. Where do you start top, or do you start on the bottom? How does this look like?
If you want to get this into, like, if you want this mindset in a large organization.
Yes.
I think you have to start at the top. I think you have to start with the most senior leaders. And the reason I say that is because people model their leaders' behavior a lot of times, and I think this is one of the things that I think if we were going to do another podcast, we could have a whole separate topic about managers' presence and their behaviors and how their behaviors impact the organization. But this is one of those things where people will model their leaders, and so if you start teaching your most senior leaders how to do this, they'll start teaching their leaders, we'll start teaching their leaders, and it will eventually permeate the organization. It's the hardest in kind of the middle management layers, those managers of managers, I think kind of the senior manager and director, again, because as I mentioned earlier, I think that's a really hard transition to make. Because you not only have to be good at doing things yourself and delivering the result, but you also have to teach your managers how to do it. And so you're kind of in that middle world. I'll never forget one time, just an example. This was when I was CTO at the time. So this was probably a year and a half ago. I overheard, I don't remember how this happened, but it happened a few times over the span of a few weeks. I had heard from engineers that were, probably 3, 4, 5 layers removed from me, that they were doing a thing because Mike, I heard that Mike wants this. And I got pretty frustrated, to be honest, because I went back to my leadership team and I said, team, I got to be honest, it kind of bothers me that there's these engineers, kind of on the front lines, that the reason they're doing something is because I want it. I said, what I would prefer is that they understand the vision and the goals, and someone's taken the time to explain to them why a thing is important, not because I want it. And so we had this whole conversation about it's kind of the lazy way out, right? The appeal to authority. If I just appeal to the highest authority in the land, I can get anybody to do anything I want, most of the time. But that doesn't teach, again, people how to think for themselves. And so somewhere in that chain was a manager who didn't take the time to explain to these people why we had made the decision, why it was important, and that they stood behind it. Not Mike wants it, right? That, again, that's an appeal to authority, not an appeal to empowerment. And so you've got to pay attention to those kinds of things. You've got to pay attention to why people are doing things and how decisions are being made. I think if you follow the thread of how decisions get made and what motivates people to do things, you'll be able to very easily determine if you have a culture of empowerment and a culture of people thinking for themselves, or a culture that appeals to authority, all the way up to the top of the chain.
So what was the end of the story? Did your management team kind of did they get more deeper into the vision and the goals of the company? And
I would say, as with all those things, there's very little, I think, that happens in an organization, especially of that size, that doesn't boil down to a person coaching another person about something very specific, right? I mean, you can do things kind of like you can get up on stage and tell everybody, hey, we want to have this kind of a culture. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really happen until you get to the one-on-one conversations. And so I don't remember exactly, but I'm fairly certain that this was a coaching opportunity for one or two managers, and so we just made sure they went and got the coaching. That's it. Hey, next time, don't you think it'd be better if the engineers kind of knew why we were doing the thing instead of like just telling them that Mike wants it? Like that's not a good reason to. I wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, so Mike wants it, but why? That's the. You should care about why, because that's the more important thing.
Right. And I think I'm getting to this kind of conclusion that really you can't have self-managing teams if you don't have a very explicit vision for the company or the project at hand.
Yes. Yeah. There's I think it's a Simon Sinek book. Is like start with the why, and this is why. If people don't understand why you're doing something, they're not going to make the best decisions, right? And this is why the Mike wants thing bothers me so much, to be honest, because and I used to tell my teams this in my role as CTO at Riot. I'm the furthest away from the day-to-day problems that the team is having. I'm the closest, though, to the company vision and direction and goals. And so the thing I can do the best for everybody is communicate how your work connects to the company vision and goals. The thing I'm probably going to make the worst decisions about is this thing that you're dealing with on the front lines, because I have no context, right? There's no way I'm going to make a good decision about that. You're going to make the best decision about that. But if you don't have the ability to make that decision, then the whole organization is going to lose, right? And that's why when you see leaders leave organizations and the performance declines, it's because the people on the front lines aren't making the decisions. They were making the decisions, and they're often the worst person to be making the decision. So yes, clarifying the goals and clarifying the mission and clarifying, what the outcomes are that you want for the project helps the people who are the closest to the decision make the right decision, and they'll make better decisions most of the time. Some not all the time. That's where coaching comes in and those kinds of things. But in general, more brains are better than your brain sitting up on high making all the decisions for everybody.
Right. Thank you for that. I really hope that this gets to people who need to hear it, or maybe some people who don't even want to hear it, but might just get this podcast episode sent to them. We touched on a lot of aspects of self-managing teams and leaders who can create this kind of environment and making it a fun experience for everyone involved, and how it all results in better performance and maybe achieving the goals perhaps faster, perhaps in a better manner. What else would you like to share, if anything, or to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would probably add is like I said earlier, it takes time. It takes time to get there, and not every team is capable of actually making the transition to being a self-performing team. And I'll give you an example. When you're teaching somebody how to drive a car, there's this basic assumption that they're old enough to learn. They have the motor skills to learn. And they've probably watched you drive a car, or maybe they took a driver's ed course or something like that. They have the kind of the raw materials that it takes to learn how to drive a car. And if you think about the way you teach somebody to drive a car, first you make them watch you, and then you watch them, and then eventually you get out of the car and they can drive on their own. But you wouldn't take a 5-year-old and put them behind the wheel of a car and expect them to be able to learn how to drive a car, because they don't have the motor skills. They don't have enough experience. They don't, those kinds of things. And so I just want to caution everybody against this style of leadership works with a certain kind of mindset. It works with a certain kind of person that has kind of a basic level of skills to, in critical thinking and those kinds of things. If you want this type of an environment on your team, you have to evaluate the team you have. You have to evaluate the skills that you have on the team. You might need to be more directive. I have had teams in the past where I have no choice but to tell them how to do it, because they don't have the experience to be able to critically think about it for themselves. And so that's just one thing I would suggest is take the time to evaluate your team and make sure that they're capable before you expect great results from them. And you may have to replace some people, but I think it's worth it. When you get a whole team of leaders that are all empowered and making great decisions, they understand what needs to happen, your life will be so much better, so much easier.
All right. Thank you so much. Awesomeness. Yeah, I have to share. What you said just really made me think about your perception of the team as well. Like, you can't really have a self-managing team if you are not able to trust that the team members are going to make the best decisions with the information that you provide them.
And that's the hard part. This is the hardest part about managing a team. This sounds terrible, but when you're teaching somebody how to think and how to make decisions, some people are worth that investment because they'll actually learn it and they'll get better, and then they will be autonomous. And some people won't. And it's again, this is probably a whole nother podcast episode about what to look for in a person in terms of growth mindset and things like that. But yeah, it really depends on the team composition and the people you have and those kinds of things. So you got to really know your people on your team and what they're capable of.
Awesome. Thank you. So with one thing we have to go away is reflection and self-reflection, and that will help us enable our teams, I think. Awesome. Thank you. I feel empowered now. Where can our listeners follow your work or perhaps follow you?
Probably I've been a little bit off the grid for the last 8 or 9 months, honestly, as I've been, kind of coming up to speed on just, running the new company. So I haven't been posting much lately, but yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn. Is probably the easiest place. And I'm sometimes active on Twitter.
All right. So LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yeah.
All right. We will make sure to follow you. With that said, dearest listeners, follow Level Up Engineering on Twitter as well, and follow Mike Seavers on Twitter. Thank you for staying with us. This was Level Up Engineering, and we talked about high-performing self-managing teams and empowering your teams and making work really a fun experience where everybody can take responsibility for the work they produce. And my guest was Mike Seavers, who was kind enough to share his experience and what he has learned from his various experiences in the past. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Dearest listeners, thanks for staying with us. I am Karolina Tóth, and I dearly hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.